Would you come with me to France? We could dance on the Champs-Élysées.
Good day. Welcome to Notes and Notions from the Writing Desk. I'm Joanne de Simone. I am your host, and I want to thank LTV East Hampton for this opportunity and for continuing in the tradition of public access, which is a true essential to us all. We just have to keep it going. And thanks to everybody here. They're all so kind to me. Well, as I do every day of my life, I send out best wishes and good tidings to Mr. Steven Spielberg, and in the hopes that one day he will meet my Metro Cats and hopefully my mean Millicent Wright. So today I'm flying solo, and with your indulgence, I would like to read a few segments from my upcoming book, from the chapter entitled Neighbors, and the name of the book is Songs from Under the L, Memories of Life in the Dark. So I'll read a few chapters, and you could always take some no-dos, and here we go. Okay, in Brooklyn, the block we lived on was shaped like in a sharp triangle, like a slice of pie. There was only one building on the block, a cemented chain of apartments above storefronts and factories, sweatshops where immigrant women worked. The dwellings occupied the second and third stories of each building. The entire three-sided structure was connected by a center opening generously referred to as a courtyard, where neighbors from under the L and around the corner from the L shared clotheslines, gossip, and sometimes secrets. Voices carried. The courtyard was a dreary place, accessible only via the even more abysmal cellars that housed the nests of rodents and insects and of varied species, spider webs and scary crannies. My brother Richard and I had Halloween parties down there because we never had to decorate. Fire escapes were attached to the buildings on the courtyard side. In the event of a fire, we would have to climb down the fire escape into the courtyard and then hope that one of the neighbor's cellar doors were left unlocked. I don't recall there ever being a fire, but we all knew the drill. Okay, neighbors. Carl and Martha lived in the apartment above ours. Martha never used the clothesline, so her line maid, Carmelina, washed her clothes whenever she wanted. In fact, we were convinced that Martha never washed her clothes or anything else. There was a persistent foul odor in the hallway, which can only be described as farts boiling in old sock water. When we came in the front door downstairs, we held our breath until we reached our landing and quickly sped inside to our apartment. Martha and Carl were survivors of the Holocaust. On their mailbox were two names, Kraus and Deutsch. We didn't know who was who, and my mother said that they were married, but that Martha kept her last name because it was a common law marriage. Carl had numbers tattooed on his wrist, which we saw in detail when he didn't make it up the 2 flights of stairs and lay on the steps in a drunken stupor, the front of his trousers soaked in urine. He also had 3 fingers missing from his right hand, so the remaining forefinger and pinky formed an absurd U effect. Sometimes he made it home in one piece, but it was a slow, agonizing, staggering journey from the train station a few blocks away, with frequent stops to lean on cars or fire hydrants. When he'd reached the top step of their landing, we could hear Martha's bellowing voice, "Get out! Get out, you drunken bum!" Oh, my brothers and I would laugh. Martha's at it again. Well, Frances would give us all a smack in the head, my mother. Have some respect. That man was in a concentration camp. He was tortured by Nazis. He has the right to drink. You little bastards would drink too, if you went through what he went through. At 5 years old, I had no idea what a concentration camp was, except that people were put there by Nazis and got tortured and tattooed. And when they got out, they earned the respect and the right to drink. We never went past our landing. Up those stairs and behind that door were unspeakable horrors, the nasty smells, the battles in a foreign language, the overall gloom. We called it the inner sanctum. One day, as I was about to go into our door, and still holding my breath, I heard a familiar gravelly voice from above. Joanna, Joanna. I was frozen with fear. It was Martha. Oh God, that sounds like she's calling my name. Come up here, come up here. Martha said softly in her German accent. Well, I couldn't speak. I exhaled like someone punched me in the stomach. My legs were like jelly, but I obeyed, and I forced them to go up the stairs. Martha was standing at the door of the inner sanctum, waving her hand encouragingly. Come in. I entered on wobbly legs, and as she closed the door behind us, the place smelled like stale mixture of mothballs and mildew. I just knew she was going to kill me, boil me up, and I'd end up smelling like those farts in old sock water. Martha led me into the middle room, and I was surprised to see that the sanctum's middle room looked a lot like ours, but instead of a high riser and a stick lamp that occupied ours, there were shelves and shelves of beautiful dolls. They were poised like a chorus line of beauties, blonde, brunette, auburn-haired, all different, all costumed in lovely dresses, capped in fancy hats over curled tresses. Some were propped on the stands, while others sat arms outstretched, all smiling friendly at me. It was your birthday, yes? I heard the people singing, "Happy birthday, Joanna," Martha imitated, clapping her liver-spotted hands. I remember thinking that this doesn't sound like the same woman who gave frequent performances of Get Out, You Drunken Bum You. Then I noticed Martha herself. She was wearing a kerchief around her head with the silvery blonde bangs sitting across her forehead, just like Olivia de Havilland wore in the Rosie the Riveter ads. And her dress was like the one I saw in pictures of my mother when my brother Richard was a baby. And on her feet were open-toed, ankle-strapped shoes, a la Joan Crawford. I couldn't help but notice that both her toenails and fingernails were deep yellow and extremely long. Her face and teeth were a little yellow, too, but her eyes were sparkling blue, crinkling with kindness as she spoke. You like the dolls, yes? I nodded mutely, still confused by the images of the monster upstairs I had imagined Martha to be, and the reality of this gentle lady who lived in Toyland. Take one. Take a doll for your birthday, she smiled, panning the shelves with her open hand. Really? I found my voice at last. She gestured again. I chose a blonde, banana-curled doll that was dressed in a purple satin dress with a matching hat. It was the most beautiful doll I ever saw. Martha ushered me toward the door, the doll still secured in my arms. You'll come again, Joanna. We have ice cream. I had ice cream, cookies and milk, candy, and all those good things with Martha. I even had the dreaded boiling farts in old sock water, which in fact was cabbage soup. She told me stories of growing up in Austria. She showed me the only remaining photographs of her family she lost in the Holocaust, and I came to understand that my mother was right when she told us to have some respect. Now, Chuck and Millie Adams lived around the corner. I didn't know what Chuck did for a living, but Millie had babies. They only had 4 kids, but at the time it seemed like there was always a new baby at the Adams house. Their son Patrick was my age, and we played cards in the middle room. I taught him to play poker, a useful thing my father taught me. He's Blackie. Frances liked Millie. They were friendly. Frances didn't make new friends. Her friendships were cemented years before, and it was a very small circle. Frances also had no time for coffee clutchers. When Millie came for visits, it wasn't to gossip about the neighbors. It was to sew or knit or talk about the new Butterick or Simplicity patterns or what color to use for her new baby's sweater. Sure, they had coffee and cigarettes, but that was done in between knit 1, purl 2, or while threading the bobbin on the old Singer. Idle hands at the devil's playground, my mother used to say. Frances never went to Millie's place because she had as many cats as she had children. And my mother had asthma, and people with asthma, she said, could not be around cats. The truth was, as we came to learn, my mother hated cats because they jumped on the table while people were eating. Millie's clothes were always loaded with cat hair, as was her apartment. She didn't care much for cleaning, but she liked to paint. So when there was an occasion in the family, like a birthday or a christening, she'd paint the entire apartment to refresh the place. But the painting parties ended and the babies stopped coming when Chuck ran off with a 20-year-old waitress. With my father on the lam from owing the bookies a lot of money and Chuck off with the waitress, there should have been a lot of husband bashing going on, but never a word was said by either woman about either man. In their common circumstance, there was an unspoken reasoning that it's better not to talk about things you can't do anything about. So they just continued. Knit 1, purl 2. Ooh, oops, I dropped a stitch. Jimmy Esposito's 80-year-old mother lived in a big house, very much around the corner from the dark L. We knew her as Jimmy's mother. She worked well into her 70s, and once in a while my mother dyed her hair. Now she was retired and she didn't care if her hair turned gray. She liked nothing more than baking biscotti and conversing in Italian with her parakeet. It seems that one day Jimmy visited his mother. They sat in the kitchen. Jimmy's mother made a pot of coffee and put out some nice biscotti for her Jimmy. She sat listening in earnest as Jimmy explained to her that it would be in her best interest to sell her house, give Jimmy all the money. He would then purchase another house where he would live, and Mama, here's the best part. I'm going to finish the basement for you, maybe in a nice wood paneling, and make an apartment for you. Jimmy's mother listened and nodded, and when Jimmy's ended his speech, she took his hand in hers and smiled. Okay, I'm going to sell my house. I'm going to give you all of the money, and then you're going to buy another house, and you're going to live in the house, and you're going to stick me in the basement. Jimmy said, yeah, Mama, what do you think? Jimmy's mother leaned forward and said, you know, Jimmy, this making no fugging sense to me. You see, Jimmy thought that since his mother spent her time talking to a parakeet, that she too had a bird's brain. Now, Dora and her handsome son lived on one side of us. Sharing the plasterboard on the other side was a young couple. They had a son they called Charlie Boy. I didn't know their names and referred to them and addressed them as Charlie Boy's mother and father. Charlie Boy and I were the same age, and we played together in the street. I'd ring his bell and holler in the hallway at the bottom of the steps, Charlie Boy's mother, can Charlie Boy come out and play? Or he'd yell up to my mother, Joanne's mother, can Joanne come out and play? So Charlie Boy and I played street games like kick the can, hide and seek, red light, green light, or basically we just pulled each other's hair out from the roots. I had a set of pop beads, little plastic colored balls that fit into each other, and made myself a really nice necklace. Charlie Boy thought it would be fun if we unpopped the necklace and popped the pop beads into my mouth just to see if they would all fit. I accidentally swallowed one, and Charlie Boy told me that I was going to die. I'm not going to die. But Charlie Boy knew better. Oh yes, pop beads are poison. You're going to die. But he had a plan. If I got off the block and went somewhere else, God would not be able to find me. And when he forgot about me, the poisonous pop beads slowly killing me, I'd be able to go home and I would be safe. It was my only chance, swore Charlie Boy on a stack of Bibles. I'll go with you, he said, and we were off. We walked around the corner and crossed more than 10 streets. 2 6-year-olds on the lam from God, one with a poisonous pop bead in her stomach. We started to get hungry. We passed a candy store and Charlie Boy bought 3 pretzel sticks with the nickel he had in his pocket. We kept on walking and it started to get dark. And when it started to get dark, I began to see the light. "You're full of baloney. I'm not going to die. I'm going home." Charlie boy just laughed and laughed, pointing at me. "You believe me. You believe me." Well, when we got to our block where the L meets under the corner, Charlie stopped laughing. A crowd of people was standing around, grouped to form a united front, exchanging nervous shrugs and looking like they just heard bad news on the radio. Everyone was there. Millie Adams, Carmelina, Sally, Dora, Big Mouth Pauline, Charlie's mother, and Frances. Frances was wearing her maroon suit with matching pumps, an outfit she saved for special occasions. Her blonde hair was pulled back in her customary Faye Emerson chignon, but it seemed tighter than usual. Her lips were drawn even tighter than her hairdo. Her arms were folded across her chest. As Charlie boy and I walked through the crowd, Big Mouth Pauline whispered in my ear, "Your mother went to the police. She's gonna kill you." Ooh. Charlie boy's mother ran toward us crying, "Thank God! Oh my God!" and scooped up her little Charlie boy into her grateful arms. Then she looked at me. "Where did you take my son, you little brat?" I just stood there dumbfounded, but Charlie boy's mother was the least of my problems. I smelled Frances, drenched in Chanel No. 5. Then came the drill. She took my hand and we marched in silence, marched out of the crowd, marched away from where the L meets under the L meets the corner, marched past Charlie boy's door, marched into our smelly hallway, marched up the stairs to our landing. When we got inside the door, the bubble broke. Frances let loose, screaming, "Don't you ever go off this block again," yelling, "When I decide to let you out again, you will stay in front of this house where I can see you." I had to speak up, practically screamed so I could explain. "Charlie boy told me I was going to die because I ate a pop beat and I had to run away." She stopped yelling, and the disappointment on her face was worse than a beating with a wooden spoon. "And you believed him?" Then she sighed, "Oh, Joanne, I hope you smarten up before you grow up or you're going to have a really, really tough life." Now, Dora, the middle-aged woman who lived right next door to us, was born in Brooklyn, but taken to Sicily when she was an infant. She returned at 18 and spoke with a heavy Italian accent for the rest of her life. Our apartments were divided by tissue paper walls. We were able to hear each other's lives through that wall, except when the train roared by, when we couldn't even hear our own thoughts. Dora had a husband once whom she referred to as a no-good son of a bitch bastardo. She threw him out years before, and after he tried to beat her into telling him where she hid the rent money. She tolerated his screaming and cursing, but when he raised his fist to her, she raised a carving knife to him, demonstrating his fate as she pushed him out the door should he ever try to return. Dora was then a woman alone with 4 strong teenage sons. They backed up her threat. She went to work in a dress factory, the store right beneath her apartment. She worked piecework, which meant she got paid for the number of collars she was able to sew that day. She was very fast on the machine and earned decent money, sometimes $30 a week. Not a king's ransom in the 50s, but enough to pay the rent and feed her kids. It was true that Big Mouth Pauline was the mother of the prettiest girl on the block, but Dora's sons were dead ringers for popular movie idols at the time. So much so that very few people in the neighborhood knew their real names. They were referred to by their screen names. "Hey, there's Errol Flynn coming home from work. Did you hear Tyrone Power got engaged? Victor Mature joined the army. And yesterday, I saw Guy Madison out on the ledge washing his mother's windows." Well, visits to Dora's were consistent, if not interesting. My mother would dye Dora's hair and touch up her roots by wrapping a pencil with cotton and sewing thread and dipping it into a bowl filled with black dye, and she applied it to her head. While we waited for this messy process to finish, Dora would show us over and over again pictures of her sons, sighing and beaming with pride. They were always the same pictures, but she seemed to find something new to brag about every time. One day, when I was about 5, Dora sensed my boredom and gave me her wooden jewelry box to play with while my mother worked on her hair. The jewelry box was brimming with all kinds of sparkling and shiny goodies, and I began to put everything on all at once. Then I spotted it. The ring, a dazzling red stone. All the pearls, gold chains, crystal earrings, everything, yes, everything paled next to that ring. I had to have it. So I put it in my pocket, and I put everything back into the box and returned to Dora's picture show. When my mother and I got home, I paraded around showing off the ring in all poses and directions. It turns out that I was a very stupid robber of rings. Frances saw the ring. She said nothing, took me by the hand, and marched me next door. Yes, Frances marched everywhere. I also said nothing, for at the age of 5, I knew that anything I wanted to say would only add fuel to Frances's fire. Dora opened the door, and Frances said simply, "My daughter has something to tell you." I took the ring off my sweaty finger, the same finger that only moments before was dancing recklessly in the air, and I laid the ring in Dora's hand. I took it, and that was it. Not a word was exchanged. Frances marched me back home, and it was never talked about again. My mother was a woman of action, and my criminal career was out of action forever. Now, these are a couple of excerpts from the chapter Neighbors in my book, Songs from Under the L. I think we all have these stories to tell. You know, if you have a crazy family, or if you have nutty aunts who like to dress up every time she went somewhere. She had a trunk full of costumes, my Aunt Millie, and sometimes people didn't even recognize her because she just loved doing that. Or if you just have stories about how good Grandma was to you. I think it's good to write these stories down. You don't have to be a writer. Write them as a journal. Give them to your kids, your nieces, your nephews, and let these stories keep being told over and over again. Don't let them die with the death of these wonderful people that were in your life. Sometimes crazy, sometimes wonderful, sometimes the good, the bad. You know, I say the good, the bad, the bald, the ugly. It doesn't matter. We just really need to keep these kids and let them know that when they moved to California, they weren't hatched there, that their family had a rich history. And my family has a rich history. Immigrant family, came from Italy between the years 1876 to 1903. Some of them didn't even speak English for all their lives, but their family was their life. And we have all of this to share. Now, I mean, it doesn't matter who reads the book. I wrote it for my 26 nieces and nephews, so they know where they came from. And I think that's really important. My father was a character, and he liked to sing this song, and to my friend Karen and me. He loved to do this to remind us that we had to grow up to be good girls. You know, good girls get married, good girls find husbands. So this is a song that was written probably in 1912. You know, I'm not going to basically sing it. You're the kind of a girl that men forget, just a toy to enjoy for a while. But when men settle down, they'll always find an old-fashioned girl with an old-fashioned smile. You will soon realize that you're not so wise when the years bring you tears of regret. For when they play Here Comes the Bride, you'll stand outside. You're the girl that men forget. So Karen and I we did not want to be the girl that men forget. We wanted to be the girl inside the church with the wedding dress. But like I said, these are some of the things that I grew up with, and it was really a lot of fun, a lot of not so great stuff when your father is a gambler. But these are memories, and we cherish them, and we always find the good in it. It really doesn't matter. So that's the book. But I would like to just a quick mention that this Sunday, February 23rd, at the Producers Club in New York City, my newly launched a nonprofit, St. Rita and Archangel Metatron Arts League, will be presenting a fundraiser reading of 4 plays, 3 of mine and 1 from my colleague and friend Gloria Craig. And if you'd like to see the details on it, it's on Facebook. And so it's just a way of getting the work out there, meeting new people, networking, and hopefully things will move forward very nicely. So for now, I would just like to thank you for sharing this time with me, and I look forward to having guests. My guest got sick this week, so you got me, and I look forward to that. And I would like to always end with saying, remember to take note that the notion of love is universal. Let your love light shine through and touch everyone that you meet. So until next time, thank you and ciao.
They have this dance, por favor. And I don't care where we are, as long as I am there with you. 'Cause there's a place in the world for those who say I love you. And if we wish upon a star, we'll never be alone. 'Cause we could travel here and far. We could stay right here